Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs War Room Update. We are on day number 278 of the war with Gaza, the war with the genocidal terrorists. It started on the 7th of October with the massacre, 1,200 people murdered, raped, butchered, tortured, entire communities almost wiped out. And that war has really been raging on ever since. As part of that initial attack, over 250 people were taken hostage. Many of them, over 120, still remain in Gaza. And that is what we're really going to discuss today at length. The efforts to come to some type of a deal, if it's at all possible, to bring about the release of the hostages. In the meantime, what we can update is that the IDF forces are continuing to operate in all of the different scenes, all over the Gaza Strip, in Rafah, in the south of the Gaza Strip, along that Philadelphia corridor that we've discussed so many times on these programs, in the center of Gaza Strip, even in Gaza City, where IDF forces have been required to again go into UNRWA's headquarters because it had again been turned into a terrorist base by the genocidal Gazan terrorists. We've been operating also in the north of the Gaza Strip in Sajaiya, just yesterday, exploding a 6-kilometer long tunnel and killing 150 of these terrorists. 6 kilometers as a tunnel, just to give a little bit of proportions, is almost the entire width of the Gaza Strip at that area. It's something which was really a mammoth tunnel that was dug by the terrorists. Just take into account that there were some 540 estimated kilometers of tunnels in the Gaza Strip. Each kilometer cost almost $1.5 million to dig. So we're talking about a substantial amount of money that the terrorists could have used to build hotels, build more hospitals, build better schools, give employment to the Gazans, but instead they chose to use that money to attack tunnels which even the Hamas leaders have said aren't there to defend the Gazan population against Israeli attacks, but are there only for the use of Hamas and its terror activities. In the north, obviously we cannot pass on a mention without discussing what happened yesterday, a massive barrage of rockets fired by Hezbollah into Israel, into the Golan, one of those rockets landing a direct hit on the car of Noah and Neil Baranis, killing them, leaving 3 orphans to face the rest of life. And they should, please God, have long lives. But unfortunately, they're going to have to do that without their parents. That aggression from Hezbollah, we've seen escalating time after time after time. There have been some discussions as to some type of political solution with Lebanon. It's not just Hezbollah that's attacking Israel, it's Lebanon, the country. Hezbollah is Lebanon, Lebanon is Hezbollah. And so eventually Israel is going to have to do something far more aggressive than what we've done until now. The Houthis from the south, have continued their aggression, firing rockets and missiles and UAVs, not only at ships passing through the Gulf of Aden, coming up to the Red Sea, but also towards Israel. The IDF yesterday reported that they'd shot down a suspicious flying object coming from the east, which really means that the Houthis had been attacking Eilat again, and so that had been shot down. So we're still seeing that continue on in Judea and Samaria. We've seen really also an escalation in the levels of terrorism. The Palestinian Authority is, we believe, no part of the solution and much of the problem. Members of the Palestinian Authority security forces taking and playing an active part in the terrorism. We've seen numerous terrorist cells popping up in all of the different areas, all of the different cities over the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and in Tulkarem, in Jenin, in Shechem, predominantly in the northern areas. We've seen also from Bethlehem, also from Hebron. And that's something which also is a source of concern. IDF forces just in the last 9 months have arrested over 9,000 people there in total. In Judea and Samaria, 4,200 people, many of them connected to Hamas as well. So that's really the wider picture. But what we're going to discuss today with our expert for today is Yoni Ben Menachem, a veteran journalist, ex-head of the IBA journalism center, and really someone who has been accompanying the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for many decades. I won't say too many, not to offend you, Yoni, but many more decades even than myself. And I've been doing this for 2.5 decades. And so, Yoni, thank you for joining us today. What I would like to get a bit of an insight. In Qatar today, where there's a summit to discuss what's going forward with Gaza, a potential deal to release the hostages. The hostages, 120 in number, are Hamas's insurance policy. To what extent can we see them giving up on those hostages, all of them, some of them, and what are they demanding in return? Just as we came onto the broadcast, we saw a new headline popping up in Israel. The Minister of Defense, Gallant's conditions for Israel pulling out of the Philadelphia corridor, that corridor which serves as a barrier between Egypt and the Gazan terrorists, the barrier that prevents Egypt from allowing the terrorists to import weapons without any restriction. What are we talking about? Is that what the terrorists want?
Yes, unfortunately, I think that if Israel will go for this deal, I think it will be something very dangerous for the security of the state of Israel. I'm talking about the deal as Hamas presents it. I know that, and everybody knows that the Prime Minister Netanyahu, he published the Israeli red lines. So if Israel will be able to impose those red lines, maybe it's a little bit logical to go ahead with this hostage release deal. But if Hamas will not accept that, Israel must not go to this deal. The main problem, Maurice, is that this deal, what the Hamas is planning to do is to release only between 20 or 30 hostages out of these 120 hostages, and the rest of the hostages, like between 90 to 100 hostages, will remain in the hands of Hamas, and they want to deprive Israel any leverage to release the rest of the hostages. That means that Israel will be blackmailed for the release of the rest of the majority of the hostages in the hands of Hamas in the coming years. And why I am saying in the coming years? Because Hamas is planning, they have expectations to use the rest of the hostages, the big group of the hostages, as leverage on Israel for future demands. For instance, they want a port in Gaza, so that Israel, so that they can import weapons from Iran in ships that will come to the port in Gaza and unload those missiles from Iran. They want that the Gaza Strip, after the war, there will be no blockade, no closure on Gaza. They want free movement to the rest of the world, so they can travel back and forth to Lebanon and Iran and so on. So if they have the rest of the hostages, the big group of the hostages in their hands, then they can blackmail Israel to accept their terms. And this is something very, very dangerous for the security of the state of Israel. So I think that going to this deal on the terms of Hamas is a dangerous move, and Israel should stop the negotiations and increase the military pressure on Hamas in Gaza in order to try and rescue the hostages.
And so what you're really saying, Yoni, is, if I understand you correctly, is that Hamas is demanding that Israel give up on all of its strategic assets in return for a very limited amount of hostages, and that basically Israel surrender to Hamas, and that as a result of the October 7 massacre, Hamas will make very, very clear and very, very substantial political gains. That's what they're suggesting.
Yes, this is what they're suggesting, and just yesterday or the day before yesterday, the Abu Ubaidah, the one who calls himself Abu Ubaidah, the military spokesman of the military wing of Hamas, he appeared and announced victory. They don't care about 30,000-40,000 Palestinians who were killed in the war. For them, they're all martyrs. They're all going to heaven. They don't care about it. The leadership of Hamas doesn't care about what happened in Gaza. What they care about is the survival as the ruler of Gaza, and that they will have a bargaining chip in their hands, Israeli hostages, a big number of Israeli hostages that they can blackmail Israel in the coming years to remain in power in Gaza and to have more concessions from Israel, as I said before.
A few weeks ago, Yoni, we seem to have been in this same situation where some type of deal was suggested by Prime Minister Netanyahu. Hamas accepted its own deal and changed many of the criteria. President Biden then adopted one of these stances, not entirely clear which one, whether it was the Israeli stance or the other stance. It was even entrenched in a decision of the UN Security Council. But really, there hasn't been any type of real movement there. What Israel had suggested was that we would be willing to release a few terrorists, even hundreds of terrorists, in return for live hostages. And what Hamas had said was that we're going to give up some hostages. They weren't clear whether it was alive or dead, and that they get to dictate which of the terrorist prisoners are released. So what has changed since then?
What has changed since then is that Israel increased the military pressure in Gaza, especially in the Rafah area. Israel occupied the Rafah crossing. Israel occupied the Philadelphia corridor, which is the smuggling route where they smuggle all the weapons from Egypt into Gaza. And Israel started to demolish the tunnels underneath the Philadelphia corridor. So Hamas all of a sudden felt shortage in weapons. They don't have enough missiles, they don't have enough ammunition because Israel took control of the Philadelphia corridor. So they were wondering, what can we do? How can we change this situation? So they said, okay, let's make a tactical move. And this is actually what happened in the recent weeks. They said to the mediators, to Qatar and Egypt, who are willing to come forward and make concessions to Israel. What will be the concession? The concession is that it will not be written in the agreement that they demand the stopping of the war at the first stage of this deal. They are willing to give up this demand, which is a lie. What they are trying to do is a tactical move to that in all the other conditions, they will actually force Israel to stop the war without it being written in the agreement. So this is something very dangerous. This is a trap for Israel, and Israel should be very careful. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu understands that, and this is why he came out with this announcement. What are the red lines of Israel? So I think that what we'll see in Doha is that they will try to create a situation in the negotiations that they're actually limiting Israel without saying that and without writing it in the agreement, but actually on the ground, Israel will not be able to resume the fighting in the Gaza Strip and put pressure on Hamas to release the big group of the hostages that they are holding. And this is something very dangerous.
What seems to be like, at least to myself, Yoni, really as a no-brainer, applying more military force to Hamas, strangling its roots for smuggling in weapons, killing its terrorists in the north, in the south, in Rafah, blowing up their tunnels, seems to be putting growing pressure on Hamas. And as each day goes by and the pressure grows, it would seem that the ability to reach a deal improves. So why would Israel think about stopping now and saying, we're going to give Hamas this tremendous success. We're going to stop the war for, at the time, the discussion was almost 6 weeks. We're going to allow Hamas to dictate which terrorists are released. And really, we're going to commit to stopping the war. Why would Israel even think about doing that?
I don't think that Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to go on this road. But unfortunately, I have to say that the military echelon, especially the high command, who is responsible for the failure of the 7th of October, they come to the political echelon and they claim, look, we don't have enough forces, we don't have enough power, the IDF is exhausted after 9 months of fighting, and we have to take a break. In order to release the reservists, in order to recruit new soldiers, in order to gain momentum and gain power, and then come back and attack Hamas again, which is a big mistake. You cannot lose the momentum of the war in Gaza. If you stop now the pressure on Hamas, you will not achieve anything. This will be a boomerang. They will renew their power, and then you will have to reoccupy Gaza and sacrifice more soldiers, more Israeli soldiers that will be killed again, God forbid, for trying to reoccupy Gaza. So I think that the problem is in the military high command, not in the political echelon.
It seems on that front, Yoni, that there could be things that could be discussed in possibly in order to bring back or bring about the release of some of the hostages. But I think the red lines that Prime Minister Netanyahu did set are really very, very clear. We can't allow Hamas to continue to survive as a governmental institutional organization. We cannot allow Gaza to continue to be a threat to Israel and allow these genocidal terrorists to again do what they've openly declared that they're going to do, another October 7 over and over and over again. But what about, for example, the Philadelphia corridor? Minister Gallant seems to be almost willing to give up on that strategic area in order to bring about the freeing of some of the hostages. Does he not see that in, I don't know, a month after the first batch of hostages have been released, Hamas will again build its power through those tunnels, that we have to keep control of that area if we seek to avoid Hamas rearming itself? Giving up on Philadelphia seems to be something which is counterintuitive both to our goals and our interests. Is that not something that Minister Gallant sees?
This is a tragic event, what you're describing, because, Minister of Defense Gallant, whom I know personally, he was, while he was in the army, he was the commander of the Southern Command. He was in charge of Gaza. And when I met with him over the years, when he was the commander of Gaza, he was telling me all the time how important is the Philadelphia corridor and that Israel should control it and so on. And now, in his capacity as a defense minister, he's saying these things that you are quoting. This is unfortunate. That shows you that unfortunately the political echelon, I think that it's the security system mostly, did not learn any lesson from the events of October 7th. I'll give you another example. Hamas demands the Israeli withdrawal from the new perimeter in the north of Gaza that Israel built to protect the Jewish communities on the border with Gaza, those who were under attack in the massacre in October 7th. So if Israel withdraw from this perimeter, who will defend these people, these communities from another massacre? Will they agree even to go back to their houses when they see this situation? So this whole thing looks very unreasonable, and I don't think that the Israeli public will accept such a deal. And you can look at the public opinion polls. There is a strong opposition in among the Israeli public to such a surrender to Hamas. And also on the political side, you already have threats from within the coalition itself, from Minister Bezalel Smotrich and Minister Itamar Ben Gvir, that they are threatening Netanyahu that they will topple the government if Israel goes to this deal. And I think that in this case, they're absolutely right.
It seems that the whole discussions also under the auspices of Qatar are again playing into that same narrative, or they're doomed to failure. Qatar isn't a neutral negotiator. Qatar is really one of the supporters of Hamas, aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood, aligned with Hamas. How are we still in that rut of using Qatar as a negotiator? Does Qatar really have the ability to force Hamas to do anything? Would it be better to go to the Egyptians? Are they any more useful?
I don't think there is much difference between Qatar and Egypt. But as you mentioned, Qatar is the head of the snake. The extremist Islamists in the Middle East, they support the Hamas terrorism, the Sunni terrorism, and the Shiite terrorism. And they are an official part of the Muslim Brotherhood. Their leaders are the leaders of the Islamic, of the Muslim Brotherhood, the movement. And if you have noticed, during the last few weeks, there were all the time reports and spins in the media that the United States is putting pressure on Qatar to pressure Hamas to agree to this deal, and that Qatar is threatening Hamas that they will deport their leaders from Doha, and they will freeze their bank accounts in Doha, and so on, and nothing happened. And Qatar will not do anything against Hamas because Hamas is part of Qatar. All of them belong to the Muslim Brotherhood movement. So this is all lies and spins in the media. Nothing will happen. And the fact that Israel, after Netanyahu accused Qatar of supporting Hamas, that Israel is willing to go to Qatar and sit there and negotiate with the Qatar Prime Minister as a mediator, this is absurd. This is really absurd.
But it doesn't seem like there's anyone else to talk to. If we're not talking directly to Hamas, which I believe that we shouldn't do, then who do we go to? Who has the ear of Ismail Haniyeh, who's sitting in Doha, that of Hamas? Who has that ability to replace Qatar as that broker? If Egypt doesn't have any leverage, even though really they should do, because they've been supporting Hamas, allowing them to use Egyptian soil as a pathway for smuggling in weapons. Is there anyone else? I don't know, the Germans. Who else could be a possible interlocutor with Hamas, with that leadership? Erdogan, is he an option?
I don't think any of these options is logical, and they do have the leverage to put pressure on Hamas. That they can do that. Egypt and Qatar can put a lot of pressure on Hamas to go for a deal about releasing the hostages. But I don't think that Israel should count on any mediators. we should count on the IDF. And if we show enough determination and increase the military pressure, this is in our own hands. We can do that. If we do that and put the pressure, they will come in the end begging for us to negotiate, and not the other way around. So this was something that is needed and was needed from the beginning of the war. And you know that there was already a deal in the past a few months ago when half of the hostages were released. It was only thanks to the military pressure that Israel implied in Gaza, not thanks to the mediation of Qatar or Egypt. It's because of the military pressure. And even now, the fact that they agreed to come back to the negotiating table is because that of the Israeli military pressure in Rafah area and occupying the Rafah crossing and the Philadelphia corridor. This is the direct results of the military pressure. So the only way to release the hostages, in my opinion, is to do it by military force and increasing the force and using the force on Hamas all over the Gaza Strip, not only in Rafah area, in the other areas also.
So President Sisi in Egypt recently carried out a whole change of the senior personnel there. What more pressure could Egypt be required to put on Hamas in order to force their hand?
Look, when Hamas in the past, before 2017, when they were making terror attacks in Egypt itself with coordination and collaboration of the Muslim Brotherhood and ISIS in Sinai, they were attacking the Egyptian military and the Egyptian police. When they did that, what did President Sisi do? He closed the Rafah crossing. And this way, nobody can go. Nobody could travel from Gaza to the Arab world to go outside. They couldn't import and export from the Rafah crossing. And it was closed for a long time until in the end, Yahya Sinwar surrendered to demands of Egypt, and he committed himself to stop the terror attacks of Hamas inside Egypt. So they can cross the Rafah crossing and put pressure on Hamas. They can deny Gazans who want to be treated in Egyptian hospitals. They can deny any movement from Gaza to Egypt. They have a lot of measures, a lot of steps that they can do, but they don't want to do that.
But and it seems that they really have no interest in doing that. It seems that they are, like I said before, aligned with actively supporting Hamas and really helping them to continue fighting against Israel, while simultaneously, and I was just reading yesterday some of the recent decisions of the UN Security Council on the subject of the Middle East, and really quite shamefully there, Egypt received almost tremendous praise for its part in trying to alleviate the damage of the war. But really, Egypt has refused to take in any Palestinians whatsoever. They would rather see them killed in Gaza than God forbid offer them refuge anywhere outside Gaza. How can we also get to a point where Egypt understands that it's in Egypt's best interest to allow Israel to beat Hamas, to destroy these terrorists, and to really create that quiet border with Egypt? Isn't that something which they should do positively?
There's a problem because President Sisi, he looks at what is happening in Jordan, and he's afraid of Hamas and Islam. He's afraid of the Muslim Brotherhood. He's afraid of a coup d'etat inside Egypt because he looks at Jordan. What is happening now in Jordan? Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood are inciting the Jordanian street to topple King Abdullah regime. And there are huge demonstrations every day in Jordan supporting of Hamas. And King Abdullah is very worried, and he ordered the security forces of Jordan not to allow any leader of Hamas to go into Jordan. And President Sisi, he doesn't want that there will be huge demonstrations supporting of Hamas inside Egypt, like what is happening in Jordan. He's afraid that he will be thrown out of his chair. You have to remember that the Muslim Brotherhood movement in Egypt is the big opposition movement, and they are, by the way,
was it not Sisi himself that carried out the coup d'état
against Morsi
and deposed Mohammed Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood president who had actually been elected in free elections, and now he's afraid of them doing what he did exactly before them?
Right, exactly. And this is why after he made this coup d'etat against Mohammed Morsi, as you mentioned, he declared the Muslim Brotherhood movement as a terror organization. So they are not allowed even to operate, to have offices or anything in Egypt. So now Sisi is afraid that Hamas will incite the Egyptian street against him like they're doing in Jordan. So this is why he's not doing anything.
That's incredible. And if we look at again, you brought in Jordan. It seems that Iran is trying to do everything it can to undermine and to and almost to topple the Hashemite regime. Is that something which you see as a reasonable option?
Yes, it's very reasonable, and they are, by the way, collaborating with Hamas and with the Muslim Brotherhood. This is a joint effort of Iran, Muslim Brotherhood, and Hamas. What they wanted a few weeks ago, like 2 months ago, they wanted King Abdallah to allow them to make military attacks from the Jordanian border into Israel. They wanted to open a new front from Jordan. You know, the border between Israel and Jordan is the largest border, 300 kilometers long. And so they wanted the Jordanian permission to have infiltrations of terror groups from Jordan into Israel to carry out terror attacks inside Israel. And King Abdallah refused. He said, I'm committed to the peace agreement with Israel, and this will not happen. And I will not allow Jordan to be another arena for attacking Israel from its territory. And this is what brought up the big incitement campaign of Iran and the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas against King Abdallah, and they're still trying to topple his regime.
That doesn't really bode well for King Abdallah, who really hasn't decided on which side he sits. Is he in favor of supporting the terrorists? Is he against the terrorists? Really, Jordan's also, at least public political support, has been in favor of Hamas. So why would he continue on that path when really those same people are trying to undermine and even his regime and even overthrow his regime? Why do none of these leaders appear to be capable of accurately identifying who their enemy is? In other words, not Israel, but rather the terrorists, and then acting against them. Why are they still playing this double game?
They had to play, the King Abdallah has to play the double game because first of all, there's a bad economic situation in Jordan, and before the war even people were very upset from the policy of the king, and there is a lot of resentment in the Jordanian street towards King Abdallah and Queen Rania, and he is afraid of a coup d'etat. And since the Jordanian street, 100%, I think, is supportive of Hamas, King Hussein cannot go out publicly and say, I support Israel, or I don't support Hamas. So he allows this huge demonstration to take place all over Jordan every day, and also especially near the Israeli embassy in Amman. There are large demonstrations, and he doesn't do anything because he doesn't want to have any conflict with the demonstrators and to have people killed or arrested. He knows that this will might bring an uprising inside Jordan against the royal house. So this is why he's playing a double game.
I have to remember that his wife at the beginning of at least at the beginning, almost immediately after the October 7 massacre, questioned whether the massacre had actually happened, questioned whether women had been raped. So their stance seems to be very much in favor of pandering to that local population, but they don't seem to be doing very much. You mentioned before that they are trying to prevent some of the demonstrations, but there seems to be also a very substantial passage of smuggling from Jordan into Judea and Samaria. Why is that not something which the Jordanian security forces are dealing with more intensively? Why are they not stopping that flow of weapons into the hands of Hamas and Jihad Islami?
They are working very intensively. Just a quick remark, the Queen of Jordan, Rania, is from Palestinian origin. You forgot to mention that. Yeah. So there's no wonder that she's talking like that. Now, what is happening is that Iranians are smuggling all these weapons from Iran to Syria, and in the south of Syria, they have smugglers who are transferring these weapons into north of Jordan, and from north of Jordan, it comes into the north of Samaria, in Judea and Samaria. The Jordanian army, is making huge efforts. I have to say that because it's very difficult to control. This is a very long border in the north of Jordan between Jordan and Syria. So they managed to smuggle, and the problem is not only on the Jordanian side, the problem is also on the Israeli side. Because if most of the Jordan Valley on the Israeli side, there is no fence, no border fence. Everything is open. So they can smuggle the weapons very easily into Judea and Samaria. And the IDF and the Israeli Shin Bet have difficulties in stopping this phenomenon. And this is how we got to the situation that the whole of Judea and Samaria is full of weapons smuggled from Iran. This is something that the Israeli security should take care of. And Prime Minister Netanyahu already suggested a few years ago, this is not something new. He suggested to build a big border fence, a wall along the Israeli-Jordanian border. And there were problems of budget and so on. But now I think they will go for this plan, but it will take a few years until they can build this barrier on the border between Israel and Jordan.
And that seems to be one of the solutions that Israel found to stop the infiltrations, the migrant workers coming in from the Sinai Peninsula into southern Israel and into central Israel, was certainly building that fence. We've seen in the north, based on the success of the wall in the south, that also with Lebanon, with Syria, walls are being built. Now we're going to potentially build a wall to prevent the Jordanians from smuggling weapons in. It would seem that our outlook seems to be more in defensive terms rather than trying to find a permanent solution to any of these situations, persuading Jordan that really it's their best interests not to allow Palestinian terrorists to undermine their own regime, should be really quite simple to sell to them, but they don't seem to be able to understand that. The same in Egypt.
No, I think the Jordanians, I think the King Abdullah, this is a different situation in Jordan than Egypt. I think that King Abdullah, he understands very well the danger of Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan, and is making an effort to stop the smuggling of the weapons, because he knows that once there is a weapon smuggled from Syria to Jordan, this can be used also against him, against his regime. So I think that they are making the utmost, the Jordanian army is trying to stop this phenomena, and this have been happening even before the war, like 3-4 years before the war. They're not smuggling only weapons, also smuggling drugs, Captagon, and so on, that is coming into Jordan from Syria. So I think the King Abdullah is very aware of this situation, and he doesn't want that to happen. This is very different from what Egypt is doing, because the smuggling of weapons from Egypt to Gaza Strip through the tunnels of Philadelphia corridor, some of the high officials in the Egyptian army are involved in the smuggling. They get money for that from Hamas. So they have an interest that these smugglings will continue.
And that seems crazy that we can't rely on Jordan, necessarily our peace partners, to have our backs from the east, Egypt, our other peace partners from the south. It seems that these peace deals were very, very fragile, and they haven't really brought about peace. So when we look towards the north and some type of political solution there, clearly we shouldn't delude ourselves into thinking that there is an ability to come to an agreement with somebody in Lebanon regarding a potential ceasefire, retreating of Hezbollah troops. Really, those would seem to be almost as ridiculous assumptions as assuming that Yahya Sinwar will give up on the hostages.
Exactly. So I just a few days ago wrote an article that as a result of what happened in October the 7th, Israel should change completely its security perceptions, because what we thought in the past before the war is it cannot give us security anymore. And what we need very, very clearly is a security zone. One in the north, in the south of Lebanon, that will prevent any infiltration of Hezbollah into Israel and make massacres like Hamas did, and another security zone inside Gaza, in the north of Gaza, to prevent the infiltration of Hamas back into the communities of Israeli communities on the border with Gaza. So we have to change our security perception. What happened in October the 7th is a big event, and we should learn the lessons from it and change our security attitude towards Jordan, towards Lebanon, towards Gaza. We have to do that. If we will not do that, we'll go back to the same situation that were in the October 7th.
One of the discussions that I was having earlier today with someone who I really do both appreciate, value, and really think that he's someone who really knows what he's talking about, is that our belief, and partly what I believe contributed to the October 7th massacre, was the fact that Israel believed that Hamas cared about the Gazan population at least as much as we did. And the week prior to the massacre, Israel's government was discussing giving out more work permits for Gazans to come into Israel and to improve their situation. And all of that was just shot down because there's that fundamental misunderstanding that is, I think, common to both Hezbollah, the PLO, Hamas, that they don't really care about the Gazan or the Palestinian population. They're just pawns that can be used to attack Israel. And the more that die, really, the better it is, because the more they can demonize Israel. And so trying to play into that whole narrative is, I think, something which is quite futile. And when we discuss humanitarian deals with Yahya Sinwar, it's as if we're talking English and he's talking Chinese, not even Arabic. We might understand that, but he's talking a completely different language, and we don't seem to be able to appreciate that.
Yes, one of the people in Gaza, a friend of mine that I know for many years, I spoke to him on the phone, and he told me a very interesting story that some of the people managed to talk to Muhammad Deif, the supreme leader of the military wing of Hamas, in the tunnels. They sent him a message saying, "What are you doing? Look, there are 30,000-40,000 people killed already. What are you doing?" So they got an answer. Don't worry about them. They are in heaven. They are martyrs in heaven. They are having good lives. You should take care about yourself. This is the answer that they got.
Amazing. It's just incredible to think that Mohammed Def's wife was actually a midwife who underwent courses and was certified by none other than UNRWA. That great UN organization for supporting terrorism. Yoni, our time is running out. Leave us, please, with one positive thought. What's going to happen in the next week? Two, are we going to see hostages coming home or not?
I personally don't believe that something will come out of this deal. I hope that it will be accepted, that Hamas will have to accept in the end the red lines of Prime Minister Netanyahu. But if he doesn't accept those terms, I think that Israel should not go to this deal because this will be a disaster for us. And I hope that Prime Minister Netanyahu will deliver his speech in the Congress on the 24th of the month, and he will meet with President Biden and will get more support from Congress, from Biden, more arms shipments to Israel. This is an opportunity to get more support, military support, and diplomatic support for Israel to continue the war and defeat Hamas. I hope that we're going on that path.
So you know me, Yoni. I claim to be somewhat of a believer, and as part of that, I believe that nothing in this world is random. You mentioned that Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to speak in Congress. Just note the date that he's meant to be speaking, the 24th of July, which really isn't really an important day unless you take into consideration that the 24th of July will be the 102nd anniversary of the signing and concluding of the mandate for Palestine. That same document that of the international community that allocated the entire area between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea for the sole purpose of reconstituting the Jewish homeland. As they say, as the mandate says, with the recognition thereby being given to the historical connection of the Jewish people to this place. I think that is quite a powerful day for Prime Minister Netanyahu to stand before Congress and say, this is ours, it was given to us historically by the international community, and it's time to stand up on the side of morality and the side of justice against these genocidal terrorists, and not to continue on whitewashing their crimes, whitewashing their genocide, and demanding that Israel really capitulate to their demands. So let's hope that really that speech will include some of that really phenomenal legal base for Israel's presence here, also in Congress. Yoni, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be back with you again next week. In the meantime, stay safe. Have a good weekend. Shabbat Shalom. And we'll be with you again, bringing the analysis as it comes in next week. In the meantime, stay safe. Goodbye.
Thank you.